Childhood coming up next.
Every day we witness signs in our lives of mankind's proudest accomplishments. And gathered in many locations throughout our city are some who see these signs and know, Allahu Akbar, God is greater. They are called Muslim, for those who submit to the will of God. And you are warmly invited to meet some of them as Bismi Arabic Foundation presents SADAQA with host Gerard Ibn Earl Bilal.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for tuning in to SADAQA. We have a very interesting program for you today. As you probably have seen us before, you know we have the regular features, the Muslim Journal Report, Nikia Bilal's book review. We have Sister Rebecca Nuriddin, who is the president of the Pioneer Social Club at the Masjid Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And our first guest today, let me, before we go into that first guest, I got to remember Wali Ali. He's going to do one of those numbers called Grand Old Pioneer. And our first guest is Farid Muhammad. Farid is chairman of the Liberal Arts Department at East West University and a principal mover of an organization called the National Islamic Assembly. Farid, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's good to see you today, sir.
Good to be here, brother.
You know, I had an opportunity to be in participation in a couple of recent sessions where you were speaking. I believe one was at IIT, and it was an Islamic Workers Conference.
Right.
And you said something there from the podium that really struck me, of your knowledge of history, as it pertains to Muslims being here in America. And Brother Farid, I wish you would kind of give us a short overview maybe of when the early Muslims came to this country, especially as it pertains to African Americans.
Well, it's a very comprehensive question, to say the least. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the blessed and the merciful. First of all, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in the show. Very, very quickly, one of the things that, in terms of an assessment of the Islamic experience in the West, we see that there have typically been maybe what we might call three strains or levels of development historically. One was primarily through what we might call the immigrant Muslim community influx into the Western Hemisphere. And secondly, the historical vestige of the slave experience, which, as we know, historically took place over several centuries. The patterns of those developments took various twists and turns, whereas the immigrant community, they were not, alhamdulillah, they were not consciously forced to suppress their cultural uniqueness, their background, their religious patterns of behavior, etc. Whereas those of us who came historically by way of the slave experience, there was a very methodical and deliberate attempt to suppress and retard those patterns of development, so that what we witness as the resurgence of Islamic activity in North America particularly have sort of taken on various nuances and strains, many of which I'm sure that your show has dealt with previously. I myself, having been born and raised in Harlem, New York, my first contact or embracing of Islam took place in the 60s by what was then known as the Nation of Islam.
Yes.
And we had different patterns of experiences. We all have evolved in various ways and means, and through what we now see is the full blossoming of the Deen Allahi, or the religion of Islam, here in the West. And this is a very joyous stage, I would think, in terms of our collective Islamic experiences.
So would you say there have been Muslims in America for over 3 centuries?
Oh, very definitely. As a matter of fact, there are some schools of thought that would try to even go back further, as we know that many of the scientists and navigators, primarily, which was primarily one of the more esoteric bodies of knowledge that Muslims as navigators and out of the schools of Barcelona and of various parts of Northern Africa as well as Europe itself, where we know that from the experiences of Columbus and many of the other early navigational experiences that we typically associate with Western Europe, many of those early navigational principles came out of Islamic knowledge in terms of mathematics and astronomy and so forth. And so some of those early contributions took place even at that time. One of the navigators on one of the ships of Christopher Columbus is alleged to have been a Muslim, Alonso, who was one of the navigators who...
So Muslims have been here for a while, and they've come over basically in two groups. The immigrants being able to retain their identity culturally.
In large measure. I mean, there are many documented cases where they too, as many other peoples from various parts of the world that have immigrated to America, have been accepted in varying levels, depending on the geographic regions of their location, depending on the amount of social and infrastructural stability that the communities that they would settle in. Many of those communities had to rely on a great deal of self-reliance, on developing a kind of, how might we say, a kind of clannish, pattern to look and be attentive to their needs of their children, and of their establishing various madrasa or schools or masjids.
These points that you think the indigenous Muslims or those who are descendants of slaves had chopped off from their experience and have to be redeveloped now?
Well, historically, because of the suppression of that, we find that among many of the Africans who had Islamic background, of which there were substantial numbers, that there was a more methodic attempt to retard the stability of family life, for example. And we know that as Muslims, the core or the nucleus of family solidarity and of community development and maturity is a requisite condition for the development of the ummah. And so the maintenance of that pattern, which both have Islamic as well as indigenous African communal concerns, from the slave master's orientation, could not be something that could be readily encouraged, because it would not lend itself, or would not be conducive to the maintenance of a system of chattel slavery. So they were sort of antithetical to each other when you just look at it in purely, operational terms, in terms of maintaining a system of chattel slavery.
I mentioned that you were a member of the National Islamic Assembly.
Yes.
And I had an opportunity to go out with Brother Farid one early Friday morning, one Jummah morning, to the farmer's market. You have a food cooperative going.
Yes.
And it consists of about 50 families who are involved in this?
That's correct.
And they're not all Muslim?
No, not all Muslim.
Tell me, this non-Muslim participation, has it been an awakening experience for the non-Muslims?
I think so, very definitely. As we know historically, unfortunately, there's been a lot of erroneous information put out relative to the forms of dawah or propagation that Muslims have used historically. And many times they would try to imply that things were done forcibly, or that converts were made in ways that did not appeal to people's intelligence and their practical social concern. What we find is that there are certain bottom line concerns that we, living in an urban environment, most of whom are family, who have concerns with the raising of our children and being cost effective in our selection of various food, clothing, and shelter needs, we simply decided to collectively and cooperatively form a kind of inter-family linkage around some very practical concerns, and that is cooperative binding. Exactly. I mean, you can't be more basic than that.
Well, Brother Farid, our time is very short.
Sure, I understand.
And I'm glad we had an opportunity to discuss a little bit of the work of the NIA Cooperative. I'm hoping that you'll be able to come on a show in the future, and maybe we'll also get the cameras out to the location there.
That would be wonderful.
Folks, I can tell you that a 50-pound bag of potatoes only costs about $8. So why are we going out to the produce market and spending for 10-pound bags of potatoes maybe $2 or $2.50 or so? Brother Farid Muhammad, thank you for appearing on SADAQA.
I will leave the means of contact for anyone who might have interest in the cause.
Please give, yes.
Okay, it would be NIA, Post Office Box 4332, Chicago, Illinois 60680. We invite any inquiries, and we will respond to them and invite any and all members.
All right.
Thank you so very much.
It's time for the Muslim Journal Report featuring Nuri Muhammad, special correspondent to Muslim Journal. Imam Nuri is going to be speaking on From the Outside In.
It is a common human practice to make judgments on a thing that we see from the outside, based on its appearance. It is a common experience that is shared by us all. Therefore, when we look at something, we make assumptions about that thing, or we make evaluations based on what we see or hear or feel. But while this practice may be common, it is not always accurate. In fact, many times it is quite inaccurate. We remember the old adage, never judge a book by its cover. Why? Because there is only so much information we get from the observation of a thing. And while it is important to observe it from the outside, we should always ask ourselves its purpose for being, its intention for doing, its reason for saying. In Al-Islam, the way we perceive life and the way we look at life is to understand this principle of inner conviction. Understanding that intention and purpose is important in evaluating any action that we see. To judge a thing only from its outer appearance is to be superficial, is to be quite on the surface of all things. But to understand the purpose and the reason behind things is to be getting to the root of what caused that thing to be. We take, for example, in our salah, in our prayer, we are told that before we even go to prayer, we should make intention to go to prayer. We make intention for the wudu, as well as we make intention when we begin to make the takbir. Intention is important, and without the intention, some scholars say that prayer is invalid, which tells us the importance of intention before action. Our point here today is that we understand that many things that we see and we judge from the outside may not necessarily be as it is. It may appear to be very good, very successful, but it may not in fact be. As well as it might appear to be something very small, very insignificant, and very uncomely. But deep inside, there's something great there. This is Nuri Muhammad for the Muslim Journal Report.
And that was Nuri Muhammad, and speaking from the outside in, a very, very insightful brother from Belize, and a special correspondent to Muslim Journal. Our next guest, and I'm really happy to be able to welcome Rebecca Nuriddin. She is the president of the Pioneer Social Club of Masjid Honorable Elijah Muhammad here in Chicago. Sister Rebecca, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to SADAQA, ma'am.
Thank you.
We met a couple of years ago, maybe I think it's going back almost 4 or 5 years ago now, where we rode together to Detroit to a teachers conference there of the Sister Clara Muhammad schools. And I can recall that you had, you recounted some stories about your acceptance of Al-Islam and how, thanks to God, he even blessed you, your sister, to come into Al-Islam, and your mother. Would you kind of recount a little bit of that experience for us?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to, Brother Bilal, to relate to you some of the story about how we came into the community of Al-Islam, which was called the Nation of Al-Islam at that time. My sister, I had a cousin, and my sister and her son came in first. So when I came, I was on my way to, I belonged to the African Methodist Church, AME Church, and I was kind of dissatisfied with the way things was going there. It didn't satisfy me. So I decided I would go to what was at that time called the Temple of the Nation of Islam. And the day I arrived there, to my surprise, I saw the Master Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was speaking at that time. And so after he spoke, then he wanted to know gave me the mic and wanted to know if I believed in what he was talking about. And I did believe in what I heard him say. So I took the mic, and at that time I joined. And by me working as I did, I had a little grocery store, a delicatessen, and I wasn't able to attend as I desired, but most of my correspondence, as we was trying to, at that time, was by mail. Mm-hmm. And then after we came in, my sister and I, my mother at 85 years.
Wait, you would correspond with the temple?
With the temple.
Through mail. Oh, the lessons.
The lessons,
yes.
To get the X. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people thought that we came from afar, but we were right here in Chicago, and we just sent, every time we would get a letter for our X, to compete for that, we would write, and they would send us the lessons, and then finally they wrote and told us we was eligible to get our X. So then I went and answered all the questions and got my X, and then my mother, she said she wanted to be with us. Mm-hmm. So she had been in the church from 6 years old until she was 85. She was 85 years old.
Well, what was it? Was it the social programs that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was talking about in terms of doing for self and building your own businesses?
Yes, that was some of it. Mm-hmm. That was the most of it. But the other part was my mother had once been an Eastern Star. And after she
That's Marcus Garvey's organization.
Marcus Garvey's old organization. My father once had planned to join and leave and go to Africa, but by her being ill and not able to travel, that changed his mind at that particular time. Mm-hmm. So he had passed during the time when she came in into the Nation of Islam.
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about the work that the pioneers do in the community there of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I should say Masjid Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I'm going to say this. I happen to be a member of that community, and I know that of all the groups that are working, it's the pioneers, our seniors, if you will, that do the most. I know that because that's what I've heard Imam Nuri Muhammad say. So you're to be congratulated that you're always in the forefront and continuing to lead and teach us. Are there any special programs that you're involved in now?
Yes, we're always involved in SADAQA, in the propagation of Islam. That is one of our priorities. And also working with the children, we'll call the extended family, and we work with the children from the cradle, and also the extended family as far as we go. We also work with the sick and shut in.
What type of programs?
The aid to the elderly.
You go and you visit?
We visit the sick. We read the Quran, Holy Quran to them, and do whatever cause they need us to do. And also carry them, see that they get to the different trips and the masjid as they should, a mosque as it is in English.
Well, that's excellent. You know, ma'am, in the Quran here, God speaks to us. It says in Surah Luqman that we should lower the wing of humility. Now, when I say we, I mean the younger generation should always respect those people that came before us and were involved in that mighty work. And Sister Rebecca, I'm going to ask that you join with me in watching this next segment of SADAQA. We've got Brother Wali Ali, and he's going to sing a song, and I'm going to dedicate it to you in honor of the grand old pioneer, Wali Ali. And thank you, Sister Rebecca.
Thank you very much.
This particular song is about the people who have been involved in the struggle, the pioneers of our nation, the pioneers of our family. God bless the pioneers. I remember sitting around the house after all our little bellies were fed. Everyone would be settled back and listening to what Grandma said. She said, "Come gather around, you children. I'm gonna tell you what I hold dear. Gonna tell you about the gracious life of a pioneer. You see, God's always had his hands around them, so when they leave, there's no need to mourn. He sent them here to save a place for the children being born. When you see the pioneers walking and they're strolling along their way, You must lower the wing of humility, tip your hat and say good day. Grandma, tell me why, oh why must these things I hold dear? Why must I lower the wing of humility to an old pioneer? I want to know why. She said, son, oh, they may be, but it was God who made them that way. And just as sure as the sun rises in the sky, you'll make it to old one day. You see, they walked a mighty, mighty road, and they carried a heavy load. They paved the way with sweat and blood, so your life you would not have to be. Grandma, tell me why, oh why must these things I hold dear? Why must I lower the wing of humility to an old pioneer? I want to know why. Yeah. All you got to do is tell me why. Grandma, tell me why, oh why must these things I hold dear? Why must I lower the wing of humility to an old pioneer? I want to know why. Now I walk that road of life, I see exactly what Grandma said. Because my back is weak and my breath is short and there's no hair on my head. We really miss you, Grandma, and the wisdom that you shared. There's so many things I want to tell you, but I can't because you've gone ahead. Now I know why, Grandma, I know why these things you held dear. And God has blessed me to see, without a doubt, you're a grand old pioneer. Said I know why, Grandma, I know why these things you held dear. Oh, God has blessed me to see, without a doubt, you're a grand old pioneer. She said I used to be your age before, boy, your boy, look at me now. Never thought that I would make it to this ripe old age, but God has blessed me anyhow. It took praying and fighting and crying determination to bring this gray out of me, son. You see, I have made it to 93. Said I know why, Grandma, I know why these things you held dear. God has blessed me to see, without a doubt, you're a grand old pioneer. I know why. You're a grand old pioneer.
And that was Wali Ali doing Grand Old Pioneer. I really like that song. That is one with a message, and the tempo and the tune is, I mean, that's commercial. I like it. And with me now is Nikia Bilal. Nikia does an Islamic children's book review, and I think she's going to have a real nice book for us today. Assalamu alaikum, Nikia.
Alaikum assalam.
Nikia, I know the book you're doing today is called Love Your God.
Right.
And would you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, this book has 6 stories in it, and I have written 2. And
You're
first,
reporting on 2?
Right.
Okay.
The first one is called Abu Taha and the Beautiful Bird. And this one is about a man named Abu Taha who has a very beautiful garden. And one day he's saying his prayer out there, and a bird comes and is chirping real loudly, but he doesn't let that stop his prayer. And when he finishes, he notices that the bird is gone. So a few days later, the bird is back chirping away, and he can't help but look up at the bird, and when he remembers that he's saying his prayer, he forgot what rakat he was on. So he goes to Prophet Muhammad and he told him that...
Well, let me hesitate, pause there for a second. You said rakat, and I know there's some people who maybe in our viewing audience, they don't understand. You mean when they're praying and they make a rakat, they're bowing.
Yes.
And they go through a certain movement that you see in the end of this show, as a matter of fact. So he forgot which rakat he was on. What did he do?
So he went to Prophet Muhammad's house and told him that he could have his garden for all the Muslims in Medina, because the beauty of the bird's song was distracting him from his prayer.
And what did the Prophet ﷺ say?
He said he accepted the gift and he thanked him very much.
That's a pretty beautiful story. What was the other story about?
The other story is called The Wise Disciple, and it's about a boy named Junaid who has an uncle named Sari al-Sakati. That later on in this book, Junaid is later on in this book grown.
From a little boy to a man, huh?
Right.
Okay, or a young man.
Right. This story follows him from his childhood to his adulthood.
And what is special about Junaid?
Well, this boy is very wise, and when he's grown, he starts teaching his own classes.
In what?
In Arabic and things like that. And in one of his classes, there is a boy who he likes the most and thinks does the best work, and other kids don't understand why he likes this child the most. So he tells them to go down to the bird shop and get 20 birds. And when they came back, he told each of them to go and kill a bird where no one would see them. And everybody came back with a dead bird except the disciple that this Junaid likes the most. His bird was still living. And the children started laughing at him because he did not do what he said. And Junaid asked him why he did not kill his bird, and he told him because Allah can always see me, and I can't hide anything from Allah.
Well, that is beautiful. Thank you very much, Nikia, for the 2 stories that you reviewed from the book that has 6 stories. And that is going to conclude our SADAQA presentation today. May peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum.